Our next presenter is on Zoom, Don Shira near Edmonton, a couple of hours behind us, is going to join us. And Don told me that he had an Edison, but he didn't tell me what model, with an interesting story behind it. So Don, welcome, and please show us your phonograph and tell us your story.
Okay, thanks, Brian. I'm a retired 86-year-old engineer, worked for 60 years, 20 in the broadcast industry, 20 in telecom, and 10 in sound, professional sound and acoustics. The electronics industry continued to develop, and thus you became a ongoing learner. My hobby, I needed a hobby, and I needed a good hobby when I retired, thus restoring various products from the broadcast, audiovisual industry, telecom. So I think I showed you earlier a restored 1929 broadcast studio transmission turntable and a tape player and a few other pieces like that. The story behind the one that I restored and would never sell is this Edison Amberola 30. I bought it from an antique shop, and it was listed as a restored machine, but it was not restored. I think the dust was wiped off of the cabinet, and that's about it. This is a machine built in 1920s, an oak cabinet tabletop. It was very poor mechanical condition. It's a single spring motor with a diamond tip restorer, reproducer, I should say, but it needed complete cleaning and lubrication to play 4-minute cylinders. A side story on this Edison 30 is that the reason it got the number 30 is because in 1920s, it sold for $30. The 50 version of it, the number 50, sold for $50 in 1920. And the 75 version of this machine sold for $75. Let's have a look at it. It plays 4-inch cylinders, and the interesting thing about this is that it was small enough to take to various locations that people wanted to listen to music. So let's listen to a bit of sound from this machine. It's quite spectacular in that it'll play back from 200 hertz to 6,000 hertz, and with a sound pressure level of better than 80 decibels. So let's have a listen.
Your mother and me, you're playing like our own folks used to be. As our presence seems to grieve you, we will go away and leave you. For we are sadly out of reach, for we are just slaves. Oh,
it cleaned up quite nicely, and it's a keeper because I've had so many people offer me insane dollars for it. But my son has put his dibs on it, and that's why I'm keeping it. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Great to hear from you, Don. Thank you for volunteering to do that. You've made lots of interesting videos and presentations for us, and that was another one. It's funny, we were talking about, the camera's not switching, is it? We were talking about portable machines earlier, and of course this is almost, as Don was saying, you could pick it up and carry it somewhere as a tabletop machine. They weren't really made to be portable in the sense that Don was talking about earlier, like taking on a picnic or something. It just probably meant that you could move them around the house or take them to somebody else's house, whereas the style of portable phonograph, the little camera phone and the one that is over there, they were more for taking out on picnics and trips. So anyway, thank you, Don. So we'll move on to our next presenter with a machine that I've certainly never heard of and a company I've never heard of. So
neither has anyone else.
Over to Steve O'Neill to tell us all about his machine and why it's special.
Which is the picture you want?
Yeah, it's the Peerless at the bottom, right? There you go. Yeah.
You want me to share it now?
Well, yeah, sure. Yeah, the reason I bought this machine is I didn't have a child's phonograph, not even as a child. I know. Yes, I know. And I'm making it up for it, aren't I? And so I was at a cabs auction, and this little thing appeared, and the label on it was child's phonograph. Okay, here's my chance. So I picked it up, not for an awful lot of money, and I took it home, and I tried to find some information about it, and I couldn't. There's a label on the bottom. It says the Austin Company of Providence, Rhode Island. So I Google searched that and came up with, the only thing I was ever able to find on this machine was that brochure that you just saw. It's not a child's phonograph at all. It's just a very small gramophone. And if anybody can tell me any information about this, that would be, I would really like that, because the tone arm does not match what's on the brochure. So obviously somebody has added this, but then again, where else would you find a tone arm so small?
So it looks right.
It does look correct, but
Yeah.
can we go back to the picture?
Mhm.
Yeah. So my model is the one bottom center. Now, if you look at that, that's a swivel head producer capable of also playing vertical records, whereas this only plays lateral records. So I don't think that this is the original tone arm. And this is a Cheney reproducer. So who else came up with another tone arm that small? I do not know. And it came with one of those, a very, very small child's record, but it won't play them because the grooves go in too close to on a child's, right? So it'll just flip off when it reaches that critical point. So obviously this is not a child's phonograph, but it's just a very, very light little machine, and it fits very well, and it looks very, very cute on a bookshelf. It does, and it works. So let's play it. It has an internal braking mechanism, very much like a Pathé. Doesn't sound too bad for its size. Has a speed adjuster on the side. And the brake. There you go.
Does
Right?
the record come with it?
The record, by the way, and here's a free plug, is in the auction.
Oh,
So if anybody wants the record, I'll put it back in the auction. So the model is called the Peerless. So the parent company was the Austin company from Providence, Rhode Island. Thank you. But they had a range of little phonographs, and they were called the Peerless. So if anybody has any more information about this, I'd really like to find out about it. So there you go. That's
very good.
That's
Thank
my
you very much.
machine.
Thank you, Steve. Okay, well, thank you very much, Steve. We'll move on to our next one. This is another Zoom one. Norman Brooks is there in Nova Scotia for us, and Norman is going to tell us about a Columbia Graffanola that is very special to him. So, Norman, over to you.
Hi, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Great, great. So I'm going to show you my Columbia Graffanola Model X, which you can see behind me here. And this was my very first gramophone, the one machine that started me on my journey nearly 35 years ago. I bought it in April of 1989 from a wonderful antique shop that used to exist around here called Heinz Antiques. Paid $75 for it. And at the time I thought that was a steal. The whole bottom had rotted out of it and the veneer was missing. But I basically rebuilt the best I could the interior. The front doors also had warped badly, so I replaced those and put some new veneer on it. And I didn't know a whole lot at the time. I spray painted the crank with chrome spray paint, not realizing what I was doing necessarily, but it's okay. It's part of the machine's history. The machine was one of the most popular here in Canada at the time. Columbia advertised it as $95, a great deal. It's one of their smallest graffanolas. The other thing that's very important about this machine is that when I bought it, I was still living at home with my mom and dad, and I spent hours working in the basement, cleaning it and restoring the motor, reproducer, and so on. And the only 78 album or records that I had was this album by Mario Lanza entitled The Midnight Kiss. This was his first movie from 1949. And it was the only 78s that I owned. And I can still vividly remember the first day I played one of this record on this Columbia, and I was absolutely bowled over by the sound because I had no experience with acoustic phonographs at all, what they sounded like. I was probably anticipating something thin and tinny, and his voice just boomed out of the shutters here. In fact, I played it again last night to refresh my memory, and it just sounds as good as the day I remember it 35 years ago. And it basically started me on my journey. From here, I spent hours in the archives, researching phonographs, particularly Columbia, trying to figure out and date them and so on. And it's been in my collection ever since, and I guess it will probably be the last one left standing if and when that day comes, which I guess it will for all of us at some point. But that's my story. It's my Columbia Graffanola Model X. And again, it began the journey many years ago in my mom and dad's basement here in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you, Norman. That's great. Thank you for showing us your phonograph and telling your story. That's wonderful. I'm really enjoying this because we're seeing all different kinds of machines with all different attachments to them as to why people are attached, and a lot of them are fairly ordinary machines. And that was what I noticed as I went along working with the people, that it wasn't, like I said, it wasn't the rarest or the most expensive or the most exotic. It was just something that had a special attachment and a memory for them that they would find it very hard to part with. Now, having said that, we now go from one of the more prosaic machines to something pretty exotic. Here we have a Victor 6, and I'm just going to say a few words before I ask Alex to speak. Alexander Witkowski is a relatively new member and quite young, and when I approached him about presenting one of his machines because of the job that he'd done on it, initially he wasn't sure, because like a lot of people, he said, well, I'm not a presenter. I don't do this kind of thing. I'm not comfortable and not used to talking in front of people. And I said, well, let me tell you a quick story. And I say this for the benefit of everybody who maybe hasn't yet presented. And that is when I first started work, I had a boss who was very articulate, and he was just a great guy. And we would go to dinners of our whole sales group, and he would get up and talk after dinner. And I used to look at him and think, wow, if only I could speak like that in front of a crowd, but it will never happen because I'm not like him. And I said that to him, not on that occasion, but another time I said, oh, I love the way you speak, and you're so good at it. You're a natural. And he said, no, I wasn't a natural. I had to learn to do it like I learned to do anything else. And he said, if you want to do that, you've got to take every opportunity you can to force yourself to do it. And the more you do it, the easier it will become and the better you will get at doing it. I'm sorry if I'm stating the obvious there, but that's the way it is. So I took that to heart and started doing it. And sure enough, I got more and more comfortable. Whether I was talking to 10 people or 100 people or 500 people really makes absolutely no difference to me whatsoever. So what I realized, though, as I went on year by year, was that I was beginning to take things from my work to my hobby activities as well, because I learned to do this at work, and then I found I came to CAPS and I went to a car club, and I felt comfortable in getting up and talking in front of people. And so it helped me in two aspects of my life. And more than that, I began to turn it around the other way as well, because I learned things and picked up ideas from people within my hobby clubs, and then introduced them into my work life. So it really was a two-way street. I learned from work and applied it in my hobbies. I learned from my hobbies and applied it in my work. But one way or another, I'm just glad I don't do it particularly well, and I don't profess to, but I'm just glad that I can feel comfortable getting up and talking in front of any size group of people. I really wouldn't care if it was 10,000 people. It's the same as talking in this room or to talking to 3 people. It makes no difference whatsoever. So that's the comfort level that I'm pleased in myself that I've been able to achieve. And I gave Alex the short version of that, and he said, okay, I'll do it. And one of the things is, doing it at your hobby club doesn't matter half as much as it does doing it at work. So practice it here, and then you're going to look like a star at work, aren't you? When you do it well, when later you're asked to make a presentation or talk to a group. So sorry for the long introduction, but I wanted to put that across, and I want to welcome Alex, and he's going to tell us there is a great story behind this fantastic machine. So Alex, tell us all about it. Just tell us your story.
Let's do this. So one late afternoon, I usually, every day, sometimes I go on Facebook Marketplace and Kijiji, and I just search for gramophones or phonographs just to see if a good deal comes up or just something nice comes up. So I was sitting and I just searched my usual, and I didn't find anything. So I just searched up the Berliner name, and this came up for a steal of a price, and I couldn't believe it. And I texted the guy, and it was the original owner. He had to sell it because his dog was sick, and he'd rather have the dog than this. And it was his grandfather's, so I guess it's like one family. It was really dirty. All of the gold plating was black, but with a lot of people helped me from this group, I was able to get it looking pretty good. And the horn was cracked too, and Mark was able to help me and glue it for me. Yeah, and so this one is also really special to me because usually I buy my machines from like their perfect working order, and I usually don't do much of the stuff myself. But this one I did almost everything myself except the motor and the horn.
What was the most difficult part of doing that? What gave you the biggest challenge?
I didn't really like doing the wood because I had to clean it a lot and just like keep going with the product I was using. I had to do it like many times, and then it came on my hands, and it was some product that takes away all the oil and stuff, so my hands were like so dry.
Skin,
Yeah, and it was bleeding, and it was crazy because, yeah.
Always wear gloves.
Yeah.
By the way, yes. Okay. So it is. I can't remember with you.
Yeah.
So is this a special machine that you would keep because of all the
Yeah,
effort you put
this
into
one
it?
is, so I have most of the top of the line machine, like the Opera, Columbia's top of the line machine with the horn. But this one I just haven't had, and I was talking to Mark a week, and then we were talking that, oh, this is the one I don't have, and you know, it's so expensive, like I'm probably gonna have it in a few years. And then a few weeks later, it just came up for a great price.
Wow. Well, you're very smart for finding it in the first place, and you're very lucky to have found it. But I have to say, I had followed what you were doing online in terms of the repairs you were doing and the advice you were asking for. And as you say, you got a great community here, and you were asking absolutely the right questions, and you were getting good answers, and the result is just spectacular. That looks so nicely original rather than, you know, tarted up. I mean,
This
it's
is like
just so
all
well done.
original, it's
Yeah.
not new gold plating.
No, it's beautiful. You've done a fantastic job with that.
Thank you.
And congratulations, I'm sure you've learned a lot from it as well. And did you bring a record
I
to play on
did,
it?
so
Go
I
on then.
brought two, but I'm not sure which one to play.
Just play us a record.
Okay. Sorry, it might take a while.
I had a mighty busy day. I hope you packed your things away. Yes, and I'm going to give the landlord back his key. You mean the key? It opened up my dreary flat. For many weary nights you sat.
Sorry?
Thinking of the folks down home who think of me. Think of me, think of me. You can bet you'll find me singing happily. Where it be, where it be? When that midnight choo-choo leaves for Alabama. Alabama, Alabama. I'll be right there. Where you be, where you be? Oh, God.
Wonderful.
Okay, well, this was everything for my presentation.
Well, thank you very much.
Mike, can we ask a question?
Yes, of course.
Alice, what did you use to polish the metal?
So many people suggested me to use some ammonia products, but I went to my local store and I bought like the only one they had, and I sent in a picture to a person that was helping me, and then I just used it, and then like a little bit I did on the back parts to make sure it wouldn't damage it, and it just worked perfectly. And
Do you know what it's called?
yeah, I have a picture.
Oh. Just curious, because I'm sure anybody who's got a machine with gold parts would like to use the same.
Yeah, I did a
You
good
only
job.
have
It's
to
really
touch
shiny.
that to rub it off, don't you? So
Yeah, and I
we
just
told you
put
that,
it on
didn't
a
we?
sponge and I just touched it and it just melted off.
That is just so well done.
Brasso?
Sorry?
I'd be hesitant because
So
it's
it's,
very,
yeah,
It's very thin.
yeah, abrasive.
Yeah.
Sorry, I have a picture somewhere, but
Somewhere.
yeah.
Well, why don't you find it and we'll bring it back.
Find it, yeah, bring it back. Anyway, that is fantastic. Thank you so much.
You
That,
should get a bodyguard also. You should get a bodyguard. I know some people will kill you for that.
so that is obviously a machine to treasure for a long time. I mean, those of us who have one are probably always going to have a Victor 6 because it's such a well-proportioned machine. It's so elegant. And in fact, like the whole of the Victor 1 to 6 range, it's just so well proportioned. Victor really got it right with that part of the range. So, good, thank you, Alex, fantastic. So let's move on to something completely different, as they say. And I'd like to ask Steve Sandbrook to come up and
What a hard act to
show.
Glad it didn't fall
No,
back.
if you thought that was special, wait until you
This
see
is a Victor
this.
7.
where everybody turns off their machines.
Yeah, you've never seen anything like this. Wow. Oh, look at this. Maybe on that one, Steve.
Okay.
Go on, I'll let you come around here and go.
This is a little Stewart phonograph that was made here in Toronto. It was made around
Put it actually that in, because you're really.
the machine, this end? It was made sometime around 1919, 1920. And I seen this listed on Kijiji. And when I seen it listed on Kijiji, it was listed for like 50 or 60 bucks. So I thought, oh, that's a pretty good deal. But the picture was so bad, it was covered in cooking grease, it was covered in dirt. I couldn't even tell whether it was originally gold or I thought, well, maybe somebody's just painted it with a brush or whatever. So I went to the guy's house and I looked at it and it was all 100% complete. There was nothing broken on it or anything. And he came out after I said, oh yeah, I think I'll take that. And he said, are you interested in anything else? And I said, sure, what do you got? Well, he had a 1940s Bakelite turntable. So he gave me a deal on the two of these together. Now, I didn't want the 1940s Bakelite turntable, but so I bought the both of them. And then 2 days later, I sold the Bakelite turntable for as much as I paid for both. So I got absolutely nothing in this other than what it cost me to have Angelo put new gaskets in there, I think, for their reproducer and that. But these were advertised, you know, at Eaton, Simpsons, The Bay. They all seem to have a price of 15 bucks. Every ad I've seen says 15 bucks. Now, the reason that I picked up this Stewart, which is Stewart is a common machine, you know, they don't really sell for a lot of money, is that 95% of the machines that I've seen are either a brown wood grain, or and there's a few that I've seen that are green. And the only two that I've ever seen that are in gold had damage to them, because the main problem with these machines is the elbow here is just made out of cast metal, and they were all broke. So even the one where Steve, Wright, what was his name? Keith Wright. He did a write-up on these machines, and the ones that he showed in the picture were all banged up, and somebody had adapted something here to make it work. So I haven't seen one that was all complete. And this is all the original paint and everything. I mean, I'm a big one for originality. I don't want something that's, you know, I like it showing a few marks on it. If it's really bad, then I'll do the restoration on it. But it's got, you know, the original polychrome gold finish here, and there's even traces of it here. And when I walk into my little phonograph room, you know, 99% of my machines are all external horn machines. You know, and I look past the Berliners, I look past the Columbias, I look past the Edisons and Victors and the other machine. And this one, for some reason, always draws my attention, because all of the others are like a dark wood, or, you know, they're oak or mahogany or whatever. So I always have an eye on this one here. But I mean, people had told me that, oh, they never produced the gold Stewart machines in Toronto. They were only produced in Chicago, because that's where the two were made. But it has a Toronto label on the front, so I don't know whether, you know, they shipped the machines up from Chicago and then stamped the the nameplate on there or whether it was made. But I thought it was a pretty unique machine. The only thing that I ever did to it was I replaced the felt, because I don't know what house this came out of, but I mean, the felt had completely deteriorated and it stunk to high heaven. So I don't know whether they had a cat lying on it or what happened, but I had to replace the felt on it. So it plays about, I'm not going to play it today because I haven't oiled it or anything like that in years, but it goes through about 2/78 on one wind, and it sounds good. And I mean, I was kind of reluctant. I said to Mike when I brought it, I don't know whether anybody's going to be interested in me bringing in a Stewart machine, right? And Mike says, well, I'll do a 3-minute presentation. I thought, well, Mike doesn't sound that interested in it either, but I'm going to bring it anyways, right? And that's pretty well what it is. I mean, since I've got nothing in it, it isn't a machine that I would sell because it probably wouldn't go for much money. Anybody that was interested in it, it's, like you give you $100 or something like that for it. Where if I actually ever needed money, I've got some really good machines that, other collectors and that have been hounding me for years to buy, right? So that's really the only reason that I wouldn't sell it, is because it's uniqueness, it's gold, it's, and I haven't seen any others, and I'm sure people in here have seen them, but I haven't seen many in the gold that have the Toronto. So, but that was it. A funny thing was when I sent the guy on Kijiji an email and said I wanted to come look at it, like I never heard anything back from him for about 2 days. So I thought, oh well, it's already been sold, and he hasn't removed the ad or anything like that. And then just before he called, Blaine McCutcheon called me and said, did you see that Stewart that's listed on there? And I said, yeah, I sent the guy an email and never got any response. I hang up the phone. 15 minutes later, I check my emails. The guy says, sorry, I was out of town. It's still available. Come get it. So there's a little story behind it, and that's why I probably like it and I wouldn't sell it.
Very good.
All right.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
Just one question.
Yep.
Does it play vertical records as well as
What's a vertical record?
like a passe?
No. Mike says no. He's the expert.
It's just a needle. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just a needle.
Yeah.
And it doesn't tip up.
If it doesn't.
No. We don't want to do it because these always get broken. All right, thanks.
That's great. Well done, Steve.
Thank you.
That was really good. Couple of interesting things with that. Oh, let's give him a hand. Did we give him a hand? We did. Oh, that's good. We'll do it again. What's wrong with two giving hands? Anyway, that was wonderful. Thank you. Two interesting things out of that were that I observed this when people were listing the items that they wanted to present. I realized that quite a lot of them didn't have much value. And I thought what Steve just articulated then, that, yeah, if you were selling off your collection, you would tend to sell the ones that were going to bring you the money that you needed or that you wanted to go on vacation with or whatever. But you wouldn't necessarily need to sell the machine that's only worth $100 or $200. So I agree. Perfect. Yeah. Hang on to that. It's not going to make you rich, but it's going to be something that you can keep and treasure. Also, the other important thing there, and Steve did mention this, and I don't want to repeat what he said, but the importance for us, of course, of a machine actually being made in Toronto. So Banfield and Sons was a company. The reason that Keith Wright got really into this, that he lived on the street where the Banfield, or the final, I think, Banfield factory was built. And Bill Pratt's wife, Betty, was very instrumental in researching a lot of what happened with the Banfield company and how it actually acquired the patents of Stewart's by default, because the American company went bust. It was based in Chicago. It went bust. All of the assets of the Stewart company were sold. And then Banfield in Toronto said, wait a minute, you can't sell all the assets and I want to be making this phonograph. And they said, oh, we're only selling physical assets, not things like patents. So Banfield was able to get the patent in Canada themselves because it had just been left void. And off they went and made that, and went on to make a few other phonographs and supply motors and other parts to other phonograph manufacturers in the early 20s before the industry took a downturn. So there we are for the Stuart phonograph. We've never seen a gold one before, certainly. We see the wood ones, the wood grain ones all the time, but not a gold one. So that was very special. So, the next one, it's me. Ah, right. Okay, we have some slides. So Rick Ellinson slides. Now, one of our longtime members lives on Long Island, and he couldn't be with us today, but I knew that he had a lot of phonographs and had been collecting for a long time. So I approached him. So Rick Ellinson of New York, I approached him and said, could you be at the meeting and could you present something on Zoom for us? And he said, unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to be at the meeting, but he said, if I send you the photographs and tell you the story, perhaps you could tell it on my behalf. So I agreed to do that. So what we have here, probably the machine itself, Mark, no, not that one, oops. No, it's all the Edison home.
Okay, hold on, because
So there we are. That's the Edison home. So I'm going to read what Rick Ellinson sent me, and it's what he calls a skeletal home. Okay, he said, I got my first antique phonograph, an Edison home, on my honeymoon in Europe 55 years ago. I no longer have that machine, but I'm still married and have retained a soft spot for Edison homes. I've owned several over the years. About 15 years ago, I finally bought an 1898 suitcase home, the one with the colourful banner decal on the top of the case. This one here, I thought this would be my last home. Oh, no, actually, not this one here. Anyway, by chance, a few years later, I saw a small notice of an auction where a historical society was deaccessioning some items. There was no mention of phonographs, but the auction was not far away. So I went to the preview, and actually there were several phonographs there. One was a suitcase home with a very low serial number and several odd features. It seemed interesting, so I left an absentee bid. When I got home, I looked it up and found that the phonograph is known by collectors as a skeletal home because of a big opening in its frame, figure 2 and 3. So the big opening in the frame. Yes, go back.
Is he talking about this?
Yeah, also there's a big hole in the frame.
Right here.
Yeah.
In the casting.
Look at that, yeah.
It's an odd casting.
Yeah. I don't think I'd ever seen one of those before.
They're very rare.
It was made in April 1897, so very early. And although Edison invented the phonograph in 1877, as we all know, he didn't enter the home entertainment phonograph business until 1896. So if this is 1897, this is very much at the beginning of the commercialization of the home phonograph. When I say home phone, the domestic phonograph. The skeletal homes were among the first that Edison sold for playing music at home. The skeletal home had an automatic reproducer and an early Emerson reproducer clamp. We can see that. So an interesting different clamp from the ones we would normally expect to see. Rick says, I called the Historical Society and quadrupled my absentee bid. You see, he'd gone home. He knew it was interesting, so he put in a bid. He went home and he said, "Ooh, this is really interesting." So after calling the Historical Society and checking it out, he quadrupled his absentee bid. Luckily for him, there must have been no other phonograph enthusiasts who saw the auction, since, he says, I won with my original bid, an amount far below the collector value. So why is this phonograph one that I wouldn't sell? Well, not only is it a very early Edison home, and not only is it all original to its 1897 manufacture, and figure 4, the next one, and not only was it sold through Hawthorne and Shebel, a dealer whom Edison suspended a few years later, but it's also my most satisfying win at an auction. So he's got the big grin on his face from having secured something really good, which I'm sure we all really enjoy if we ever get that opportunity. So Rick, in your absence, thank you very much for sharing your home with us, and you'll see this on the, he did say that he would be looking at the YouTube video of our meeting later. So thank you, Rick, and we really appreciate you telling us your story. Okay. All right, so on to our next one. Thank you, Mark, that was great. On to our next one, which is you, the tinfoil reproduction.
Okay, when Mike asked me to pick a machine, the one machine, my first inclination was it'd be a lot easier to pick the one machine I can live without, right? So it took a lot of thought. So I thought, I thought this is, I like the early stuff. Like I love the Victor 6, I can really appreciate it. But frankly, that's not the machine for me. I like things that are really early and primitive. And I thought, well, the most primitive one I have, the earliest one is this one. This is a replica of an Edison tinfoil machine. So when Edison scribbled that little diagram that he gave to his master machinist and said, this is what I want you to build, this is what he ended up building. This machine here. So this is the first machine ever to record and play back sound. And I say record and play back because there were machines previous to this that could record sound, and you could see the sound waves. And we've now actually been able to convert those into sound waves again and hear them back from the 1860s. But in 1877, he was the first one really to conceive of the idea of not only recording, but playing it back. So this is an Edison tinfoil machine. And the way it works is the drum is wrapped in tinfoil, and the tinfoil they used back then is different than the tinfoil we use now, because the tinfoil we have now is aluminum. This is similar to original tinfoil. It's much more pliable, doesn't stay in position as well. So it would be wrapped in that, and then it's hard to get it wrapped and overlap properly, and then I usually tape it down. And then you adjust this needle, which can be adjusted very finely. You adjust this till it just indents the tinfoil a little bit. And then you speak in here and rotate the handle, and it puts little bumps on the tinfoil. And I'll have these up later. You can come and take a look. This is a piece of tinfoil I've recorded on. And you can see the little pattern of bumps. That's me right there. So once that's done, you pull the needle back, you rewind it, and this actually works really well. I've recorded a number of times on it. For a voice, it's actually pretty good. Then you adjust this needle, the playing needle, to sit in that groove. And as you rotate the handle, the needle rides over the bumps and reproduces that original sound wave or vibration. Right after they built this, I think someone in the lab probably noticed, the playing needle and the recording needle are basically the same thing. We don't really need this. We just play it over with the recording needle because they're both smooth needles. It was built by, I think it was Bill Williamson in the States. He told me he was going to be making these. He made another, it was called the St. Clair machine, which is a big brass machine. And I saw that at a show, and I talked to him, and I said, are you going to build any others? And he said, I'm building a replica of this. And the plans are available. They were published by Edison's company, the Historical Society. But the plans aren't exactly right. They're not perfect. So Bill had access to look at the original and take some measurements. So he made up plans that were a little bit better. On this, these holes were there in the original. These tool marks that are still here, they're all original. It's exact as it can be. In fact, he built this for the Edison Historical Society, and they bought the first one from him. So I think he made 10 of them. So these holes are original because the plate that they used at the time in the lab was someone just said, well, I need a plate to mount this on. And someone said, well, here's an old telegraph one. Just use that. When I did get it, I wrapped it up and I tried it, and it wasn't working at the beginning. And I took a look at the grooves, and I noticed it's screwed up at the beginning. The first half a centimeter, the grooves start going this way and then they're recut going the other way. So I phoned him and I said, what's going on? The grooves are backwards, like you screwed up the first few grooves. I said, it plays, it's fine, but it's not as exact as I was expecting. He says, no, that's the way it is on the original. When they cut the original grooves on it, the guy was doing it backwards and realized, oh, screwed that up and fixed it. So he said it's actually exactly the same as the original. So I'd play it, but it's very hard to play this kind of thing.
What's the diaphragm material?
The diaphragm material, in this case, I believe he used mica.
Mica?
No, this one, let's check. Yeah, he used mica here and some kind of very hard board for the recording one. The original would have been glass, I believe, on both sides.
So, Mark, you mentioned it was a steel needle. Is it like we know a steel needle?
No, it's smooth, it's rounded.
It's rounded.
And it's rounded just enough to fit into this groove without cutting the size of the tinfoil. So it's a little bit smaller than the diameter here. But I thought, it's the earliest one. If I'm going to keep one machine, why not the first?
You brought in 1 year's music. Is it the same one that you brought in?
No, the one I brought in that time was the Edison Parlor, which is it's got 2 sides on it. It's a very small little toy one. After he made this, he got Bremner Brothers to build a small home version of it, but they weren't really successful. And then he built larger ones for exhibitions, which, there's not many of those around. There's probably only a dozen of those around. So this one actually the original ended up, when Edison took it to England to demonstrate it, he left it there. And it was years later that the government said, can we get that thing back? And then the British government, I think, gave it. So there's somewhat of a story behind that. But they didn't see it as very important either. They left it in disarray. People had been playing with it and taking it apart, and they had to sort of look around, get all the parts, and send it back. Edison then had some of these replicated, but they weren't quite as exact as this one. So. Thanks.
That's great. That's very nice. Well, that's pretty special, isn't it? Not often do we see a tinfoil machine. And interestingly, the fact that it's a repro doesn't make a lot of difference because it's an exact copy and it works perfectly, or as perfectly as they ever did. Of course, we all know that putting a steel needle, even a rounded tip steel needle, pressing it into tin foil is not going to create a long-lasting recording, is it? So that's why.
Yeah, it plays maybe once or twice.
Yeah, that's why Edison went off and did other things for the next 10 years until he was stung back into action by the actions of his competitors. But anyway, that was great to see that. We don't often get a chance to see a tinfoil machine and hear how it operates. So that was very special. So thank you again, Mark. It was great. And following the same vein of doing things completely differently, I'm now going to invite Trevor Comer to come up and tell us about his McLagan M17. Sounds like a spy thing, doesn't it? Really? Over to you, Trevor.
All right, guys. First time I've been asked to do show and tell in a very long time. I think we got some pictures here of the McLagan.
Is that these ones here?
Yep. So that's
okay.
Just a few things. I gave a presentation a little while ago about my McLagan. The M17 and the Fletcher arms had a real problem with the pot metal, just expanding and self-destructing. This was my fix. So this is hard plastic with 3 bearing races in it, and the 2 set screws are the pivot for the arm. Luckily enough, it got it working again. So I was asked to tell a little bit of story about this. So story time. This is a family piece, and of course, I would never sell it. It's not complete, it's not the best shape, but we have a long history. This was given to my grandparents.
The next one?
Roll on. Yeah. This was given to my grandparents as a wedding gift, used. They went on to have 9 kids. Good old farm kids, so you know it didn't get treated all that well. And it survived. As times changed, of course, TV and radio took over, and it was moved to the top floor of a huge log farmhouse, where it stayed basically untouched for decades. That is until a few of us curious grandkids found the secret room. Here's where things get interesting. I remember myself and my cousin Michael, just little wee guys, finding it under a sheet behind some cardboard boxes. Well, being young lads, we got up to no good. I opened the door and couldn't open the lid all the way up. So I tried using the internal shelves that held the records as a ladder to climb my way up, as my cousin held it steady so it wouldn't tip over on us. With two hands, I grabbed the grill. There's a picture of the grill here. There's two little decorations there that went missing. Unfortunately, those were the two I grabbed to pull myself up, instantly have them break off in my hands. They were quickly hidden. The plan then changed to standing on the cardboard boxes to look inside the lid and crush them as well. It looked like a record player but had no cord. The felt was faded and curling up. The arm was stiff but still moved. We spun the turntable by hand as fast as we could. Well, that was fun. We dropped toy cars on it to see them fly off. So we're spinning it like crazy and dropping dinky cars on it and watching them go into the sidewalk. My cousin Mike decided to hit the cars with the arm. So now he takes the Fletcher arm. As the cars are whizzing by, he's trying to smash him with the arm. Well, that made a huge noise like a car crash as the needle punched all the way through the felt and stopped the turntable. So imagine the noise of just jamming it into the turntable. We thought that was great. This was awesome fun. This went on till one of us got stabbed by the needle. Wasn't me. Cousin Mike cried and then got mad, and the game was on. He grabbed the arm and tried to stab my hand as I was spinning the turntable. So repeatedly. Then the arm broke. The ring that held the pot metal bearing had broke, so the upper escutcheon ring had split. So now we were in for it. We packed it all up and said nothing. But next Sunday dinner, we were back at it. This time we got caught red-handed. The door opened and there was Grandma. Her instincts had told her something was going on. We all got a butt whooping. Sulking my way out of the room, I looked back, and for the first and only time, I saw my grandmother cry. We never went in that room again. Years had passed and all was forgiven, but I could not forget. I grew up and was now a young man. My grandfather passed first, and drama ensued, and the aunts and uncles basically took whatever they wanted. Then my grandmother passed. Arrangements had been made to sell the contents of the family farm at auction to pay for the funeral. All the antiques and anything of value had been picked through by the family. So at the auction, I was surprised to see it sitting there where I knew I had to get it. Had to make things right again. I didn't have much money. I waited and passed up other items on the block. Then at the end, it came up. Bidding started low, then 25, then 30. All my relatives bidding with what they had left. So things slowed up, and I put up my hand. $100. I shouted from the back. All eyes turned, some of them angry. Someone wondering who I was. They didn't recognize me as all grown up now. That bumped the bid to 110. I had to have it. I was stubborn. I said 200 then. This really cheesed off everybody. Everyone was shocked. One aunt that didn't recognize me said I wasn't even family. The auctioneer smacked down his hammer and it was mine. My father snickered, standing behind me, slapped his hand on my back and said, "Now how are you gonna get that home?" Because at the time I was riding a motorcycle, my only vehicle. Didn't think. At the time I had a motorcycle. So I had the wrong I had done years ago. I changed the felt, easy. Hot metal bearing was a different story. Years later, I had a plastic ring made with new bearings, kind of play. It was playable. I was happy, but not done. Another 10 years went by and I found someone selling a whole new arm. Now I had it looking almost like it did when I first saw it. I like to think Grandma gets a small smile every time I play it. Not perfect, not complete, and not for sale. Sometimes a thing has much more value than it seems. There's a picture of a coffee crisp. Just a PS on this.
Oh, I think that's,
It's right there. Found this in the gramophone after restoring it years later. And I was the only one in my family that would spread the wrapper out flat and hide them. 10 cents for a coffee crisp back then. So I've had a long history with this one, and that's probably why I'd never sell it.
Question, the arm you showed on that, will it turn both ways for vertical and horizontal?
Yep.
The one I've got is model M25, and the
Oh, yeah.
compressor reproducer, the arm on it, it's got the ball on it. It will not turn with.
No. Now, I have an M25 too, and it's a whole different arm on it now.
Yeah.
So the Fletcher arms were the only one I know of that would flip it to play Hill and Dale.
Yeah.
So-
M25, are they capable
I don't think so. I think it's just straight fixed needle. If you go back to the pictures here of the counterweight on the Fletcher arm,
of? Yeah.
it will let you play Victor Columbia, Edison, and Pathé.
Possible to put all those arms on
I'm not sure if the bore size is the same, but if you had an arm, you could probably swap it out. I think the M25 is slightly bigger and a longer arm though.
M25. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I just wondered, because I've only thought, I've got some diamond disc records, and I'd love to be able to play them on it, but I don't think it's possible.
Not on the M25 as it
Not on
is.
the M25, but the.
How stiff is that? I have the American version of it, whatever it's at the name of the manufacturer. The ring is supposed to turn for different. At the
It
base.
has catches in it, so you kind of have to wiggle it and then it'll lock into place.
But do you have? Yeah, I'm afraid of the pot metal, obviously.
Yeah. Well, the
does-
pot metal's inside. The counterweight itself is nickel plated. So it's
I'm
usually
afraid to touch it, basically. But
Okay.
is it supposed to be sort of resistant to turning?
a little bit.
A little
yes.
bit. Okay.
If it doesn't want to move at all, then soak it. and-
Soak it in whatever.
Thank you. Oh,
You were saying that in your pictures for your, the one you were showing, was made in Toronto, mine was made in Stratford.
yeah, that's where it was. The picture shows J.A. Blackburn of
Yeah.
Toronto as a sales office, but I believe they are all made in Strathroy from the McLaughlin Furniture Company.
Yeah, it's all furniture, isn't it?
Yeah.
What was it, I can't remember the first name. McLaughlin, something McLaughlin, George McLaughlin. They had a factory in Stratford up until, I think 1918, 1925, in that area. Done some research on it. Part of the research being some pub stuff. but we have a lot of different machines, not just the road.
Oh, yeah.
And the two that we've got, one you've got, and the one I have are the Queen Anne's here.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. Well, thank you very much, Trevor. That was great.
Question?
Well, I just wanted to say, I've got a McLagan at home, I don't think they get as much respect as they really deserve, because I salvaged one, and I was gonna take all the guts out of it, turn it into a liquor cabinet, that's the only reason I bought it. So when I got home, because the cabinet was a beautiful shape, when I got home, it's got all kinds of features that you don't see on a lot of the other, mid-range console machines, like the automatic shut off, or the changes the tone by pitch control. Yeah. I mean, they're a good quality machine.
Yeah.
Don Woodrow did the repairs on mine 20-some odd years ago. I was surprised at how well they looked at this.
Yeah.
I just got a plunger in the side there. You pull out, push in, and I guess it goes into the internal horn. It goes into the speaker.
Yeah, it's like just putting a sock in it, isn't it? Just a big fluffy ball. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, let's move on, and you can talk about that later if you need to. But that was fantastic. Although I have some serious concerns, Trevor, about your membership in this club after what you did to that machine. That was really painful. You see, we bring out all the emotions in this meeting, don't we? That was painful, wasn't it? But
he
really,
redeemed himself.
but really entertaining. You did redeem yourself, absolutely. But I thought that was a fantastic story. I read it before you presented it, and I love that one. That was great. Well done, thank you. So we move on to one more presentation, well, and one more after that. So I'd like to introduce our Vice President, Brian Nix, who's going to talk about a very special machine of his. Over to you, Brian.
I remember your speech about talking in front of people too.
Yeah.
I got the same one, and here I am after leading a few of these meetings. So can you see that? Okay.
Yeah, that's good right there.
Right there, okay. So yeah, I've got a bit of a display here because none of this is for sale. For those who don't know, this was passed down through my family. This was originally my great-grandfather's. So not my dad's, who a lot of you know, not my dad's dad, but my dad's dad's dad. So, and I always display it with these pictures, whether you see them in the video or not. But I've always got pictures of my great-grandfather with it. It's a Berliner B. And basically the story behind it is my dad was quite young, probably younger than my son Kyle, who's here. And he would always see it in their home, in their attic. And I think one day he asked if he could get it, but I don't remember don't know the whole history of it. But I do know that I think he was told by my grandfather, says, "Son," so my dad, "son, that gramophone used to be your grandfather's, and it was passed on to me, and someday it will be yours." In 1966, my dad moved to Sarnia, and he begged my grandfather, his dad, to give him the old gramophone. And I'm assuming because he said it was, years of dust and dirt, it had probably not been used in many, many years. So he said, my grandfather reluctantly agreed, but he brought it home. My dad said he cleaned off all the dust and dirt, gave it a few drops of oil, and it worked. So, like I said, I have no idea how long it was in an attic, how long it was not used, but it just started right up. As mentioned, it's a Type B, patented February 24th, 1897 from Montreal, Quebec. This is pretty much all original as far as I know. The only thing that I do know was replaced is the elbow, because these leather elbows tend to deteriorate. Other than that, I believe everything is original. The crank, it's got the record attachment to hold the record down. I believe all original, and some old brown records to go with it. And the other thing that it has, I believe this is original to this machine too, is, I don't know if you can get this on the small, but it's the original box that would hold the reproducer. And right on the top here, it says, the Berliner automatic sound box, is made more delicate than a watch. Handle with care, replace in box when not in use. And I don't know if anybody actually puts the reproducer back in the box, but that was intended originally the use. And it says E. Berliner, manufacturer Montreal. So that is the original box from the reproducer. Along with this, I display my Dipper dog, which my dad always had. Just kind of goes hand in hand. Through my collection, I picked up His Master's Voice record cleaner, Berliner, and my record needle tins I basically keep of all the Berliner needle tins. And I just that's my collection that I keep all together. I believe this record book, it's got a name in here that is, I believe, an ancestor of mine. And sure enough, when Mike asked me to do this, I didn't know if it would play because I hadn't played it in a while either. Well, I started it up yesterday and it does play. So I will turn it maybe for the sound and give it a bit of a play.
Your dad did a presentation on that 20 plus years ago.
He probably did. He probably did. And I'm sure my son Kyle will do a presentation of it as well in another 20 years. Which way? I just want the sound to be.
Yeah.
Oh, the
Sound over there.
That's
Okay.
just the camera.
Yeah, but I can't see it. I'm looking down.
Okay.
Oh.
I believe this is just a talking record.
I went out and bought a new pair of trousers the other day to go to a party with, and when I got home, I found they were 3 inches too long. So I told Mother, I said, Ma, would you kindly cut 3 inches off the trousers and hem them up? Mother said, my dear boy, I'm so busy I can't bother with your trousers. So I went to my eldest sister Emma, and I told Emma, I said, Emma, I bought a pair of trousers.
I won't play the whole record because we don't have a whole lot of time, but you get an idea there. And the break works. And I don't play it, but it's definitely never going to be sold. Obviously, because of time, I can't display everything, but at my home, I've got many machines, and this is just one of 3 that I will never sell. And just as a quick example, I have a VV4 at home, which was the very first one that I bought when I started taking over the gramophone business of my dad. And I have 18 at home. With the story behind that is I'll never sell it because when my dad and I picked it up with a trailer on the back of his Crown Victoria, probably 80s model, nothing old, I told him, you're not selling that one, because immediately I could tell it was a nice machine. But obviously this is the most prized one, and after me, this will go down to my son Kyle. So.
Very good. Well done. Well, thank you, Brian. That is, as Steve pointed out, that's a very special machine to all of us, in fact, because Brian, for those of you who don't know, Brian's dad, Bob Nix, was a president of the club back in the early 2000s and sadly passed away a few years ago. But it's just fantastic that this is being passed down all the way through the family, and we've already got the succession plan in place with Kyle, who is here in the audience as well. So that's a great story, Brian. Thank you very much for bringing it along and presenting it to us. Don't put it away because I'm going to take some measurements. Okay.
Now we'll look at the elbow.
Bear with me a second. So our last machine today is, maybe I'll put it up here. Is it better if I put it here? Yeah, it shows the detail a bit, doesn't it? So our last machine today is one of mine. And what's special about this, oh, you can't see me. Yeah. If I'm better there, is it? Okay. Yeah. Right, that I can stand next to it. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Steve. Yeah. So what's special about this one is that it was my first phonograph. I was living in Belgium in the early and mid 1980s, Now, I guess it was about 1984, I would think, that I lived in the south of Belgium on the battlefield of Waterloo, and about an hour's drive away was Antwerp in the north of Belgium. And I used to go and see one of my distributors there, who was on a little back street in the city of Antwerp. And just a few hundred yards before I got there was a little antique store. And I would drive past. I didn't collect antiques at that time. Had no particular interest, but I just drove past and I saw in this dingy little window this brass horn glinting, or brass something or other. I wasn't even quite sure what it was. I must have driven past that place 10 times at least on my weekly visits, and I just didn't have time to stop. And then when I left, I never thought about it. I went on somewhere else. So I never investigated until one day I said, got to do it. I got to stop and find out what this thing is. So I went into the antique store. It's attached to a little gramophone. And I didn't know anything about gramophones. I collected records. I was a child of the 60s, so I had all the great pop records of the 60s and 70s and so on. And I was very much into music, but I certainly wasn't into antique phonographs. I knew nothing about them, didn't know what they were, didn't know they existed. But anyway, I went in and I just fell in love with this thing. And my birthday was coming up, so I told my wife about it. And in the end, we went up to Antwerp and we bought it. So there it was. I had my first phonograph. In the intervening years, before I arrived here, I then moved to Paris, and there I found this strange cylinder thing called an Edison standard phonograph. Again, never knew they existed, never knew that music was played on cylinders, didn't know anything about it at all, but I bought that as well. So, like Mike said, you can't just have one. Now I've got two. And then I came to Canada and I found caps, and I won't bore you with that story at the moment, but a few years ago, well, no, probably a lot of years ago now, I wound it up one day and the spring went clunk, clunk, clunk. And I thought, oh dear, the spring is gone or it's all jammed up. So I took it to Don Woodrow to repair. And he said, Mike, he said, you do know this is a crapophone, don't you? And I said, because in those days, we were only just beginning to learn about crapophones, the machines coming out of India and maybe other Asian countries that were, manufactured using motors from portable machines that were still being used in those countries, and then put together with cheap wood and put a little HMV decal on the front and make a fancy brass horn for it. That was what we have termed the crapophone. And he said, you know, it is a crapophone. And I said, well, actually, now that you mention it, if I look at the horn, absolutely. And certainly I know now, I would spot that at 100 yards and know it was a crapophone horn. I said, yeah, that's disappointing. I suppose it is. But anyway, he repaired the spring for me. And then I said, but Don, it's got a Columbia reproducer on it. It's obviously not a Columbia machine. And it says Polyphone on the front. And this is all handmade cast metalwork. So of course with Polyphone, which as many of you know was a music box manufacturer, I wondered if, like Symphonian and one or two other music box manufacturers, if they had decided to go into making phonographs as well. When the music box market collapsed, maybe they decided to go into phonographs as well. But then I thought, no, there's things that aren't right. The tone arm on this, the case itself, it's not quite right somehow. So I don't know how or why somebody went to the trouble of putting on all of this really ornate, beautifully crafted metalwork around the thing. And whether it really is a polyphone or was a polyphone that then got doctored in some way, I have no idea. But of course, the point is, it was the first phonograph I ever bought. It was my wife who bought it for me, so I would never, ever sell it. So let's just have a little play, because it does work. I mean, you could wonder whether the thing works or not, being a crapophone, but but he says confidently it should work. Oh yeah, I always do that because I stand the wrong way round on these things. Okay, don't call us, we'll call you. So, there we are. That brings us to the end of our presentation. I would like to thank the 10 other CAPS members for stepping forward and presenting their machines. There's some really wonderful stories in there, and I'm pleased with the way everybody came forward with stories like that. I mean, Trevor's story, I mean, you can just picture the little kids and grabbing hold of the grill, oh, the grill coming away in your hands and that kind of thing. So just wonderful. So thank you everybody very much for being part of this presentation. I hope everybody at home on Zoom enjoyed it, and I hope you in the room enjoyed it too. So thank you. Great.
Mike, thank you very much for putting all that together.
You're very welcome.
So we're going to take a short break now, usually about 15 minutes. Oh, I'm sorry, Don.
Oh, go ahead. Yeah,
No,
absolutely, yeah.
no, we can't have a break until.
Okay,
you
quick
come up.
There we go. For the 50-50 draw, so it is definitely appreciated. Just to quote Bessie Smith, I need a little sugar in my bowl. So thank you, Peter. What did you want? Do you want tickets? I knew you would. Okay, Peter starting things off, a man of complete generosity. There we go.
I never won.
You get one. You actually get three, Peter. Isn't that
Yeah, I know.
amazing? Okay. I'm sure you'll do fine. Didn't you win the last time?
No.
Oh, that's a bummer. Okay, good. So I'll be selling them over here as soon as I grab a coffee and a donut and whatever's over there. So put a little sugar in my bowl, folks. It all adds up.
Get your 50-50 tickets from Don.
Yeah, get my 50, yeah, right for me.
That's got it. I just said we'll be back to the auction. Remember the big lot.
Yes, so we're going to take a short break now in the room, and we'll be back in about 15 minutes or so for the auction. And you'll probably get a better view of what's being on table two. I know you often go over it. You've done that already? Okay. And so we'll see you back shortly. Thanks for playing.